What is up? It's Tom here on what's going to be the messiest live stream, maybe the messiest piece of content I've ever put together here. Um, on the trade deadline, did not expect to be able to live stream, but here we are. You're probably going to see stuff go down quicker than I am because this stuff is tough to keep track of. I'm not even sure if anybody's going to show up because, again, I didn't think I'd be able to live stream today. I should probably put this out at least a place or two. So, it's a lot to keep track of. We'll see what happens here. Let's go. Let's go, Twins. Let's make a move. Here's the wild card picture. Twins are a game out of the wild card. Some of these teams in the mix, like the Texas Rangers, who are only half game behind the Twins, are rumored to be selling. So that's pretty nuts. The Blue Jays went and grabbed Jose Soriano, and reportedly are getting calls on him. So he might not stay there. Who knows? So just like this last less than an hour, we're down to like 40 minutes here. This could get really nuts. Maybe not too, though. We'll see, especially in Twins land. I think I saw, let's see, the Brewers are getting Antonio Senzatella, who is a guy that I did include on my bullpen list of potential targets. Not as like a huge moving the needle guy, but as somebody who I thought would be a good upgrade for the Twins. Not necessarily a guy who is going to slot in above even Yoendrys Gomez or Andrew Morris, but sort of like an up arrow reliever who looks like he is found something different for Colorado than he's been in the past. So he is off the board. So, I feel like I would be really surprised if the Twins did not make a move. And we know from last year, just because we're getting down to the last 40 minutes here, doesn't mean multiple deals can't happen. So don't assume just because nothing's happened yet that nothing is going to happen. I would say that. And then also, if Trevor Larnach was that close to getting traded for a reliever on an expiring contract, number one, I think Trevor Larnach, just regardless, is probably gone. And number two, you have a bunch of teams across the league now that have a really good handle on your exact price, your value you're looking for Trevor Larnach. I have a really, really bad feeling that, or I have a really strong sensation that Trevor Larnach is going to get traded, that being the case. Now, one thing that might kind of complicate things is he stayed in the game, but Walker Jenkins, after making a catch on the warning track, came up limping. Stayed in the game, kind of ran in the outfield a little bit to convince Brian Dinkelman that he was fine. But, some of those deals, it looks fine. And then, of course, they're going to do imaging on them if it's your tippy top prospect like a Walker Jenkins, and they see something in there. So there's no reason to be, too paranoid about it, but that doesn't mean I'm not. To be completely honest, and I apologize, I'm getting some screens set up in the background here so we can potentially pull some info up if the Twins make a move. And I don't know if I can. I can't really pull this up without jumping around here. So, pardon me. We'll do those two. There we go. Oh wow. Marcelo Meyer getting traded. I think he's been on the injured list. Once like a top 10, I think, overall prospect in baseball. Man, the Red Sox are really going for it. And something interesting to note there is Boston is one of the worst hitting teams against right-handed pitching. So I've thought for a while that they might be a good match in a Trevor Larnach trade. It sounds like the Padres are checking in on Larnach. So yeah, a lot going on. Again, just kind of do I have the chat? I don't have the chat on this one. Okay. Again, threw this together last minute, so still sort of figuring out what I have set up and what don't I. Yeah, Zach Neto, that was Bob Nightingale, the senior Nightingale. Zach Neto was thrown out there. He is not a free agent, I don't believe, until 2030. So that would be a gigantic haul that the Twins would have to give up for Zach Neto. Um, that even goes beyond like what they have at shortstop coming through already. Yeah, why would they even want him? And there's some confusing stuff about his profile. I'll be honest, since I don't watch Zach Neto every day, I can't really give like my own thoughts on his defense. But a guy who came up as a or was drafted as a well-regarded defensive shortstop, a guy who can make some highlight reel plays, but some of his defensive metrics are great. Some of them are really bad, like Brooks Lee at shortstop bad. And that's just really confusing to me. 20 homer shortstop, those are hard to find, but a guy who chases and swings and misses a ton. So, the only the only way I could see that make sense is if you're trading Kalen Culpepper and or Merrick Houston in that trade. So, yeah, I'm afraid of what that means. That was the other point I was going to make. Number one, it's really hard for me to believe Trevor Larnach is going to be here, knowing that the Twins almost traded him and that now every team in baseball kind of knows the asking price. Number two, it would be surprising if the Twins don't do something to me if they're sniffing around something as big as Zach Neto. And again, Zach Neto starting shortstop, this wouldn't be like an earth shattering move in terms of him being moved, but the fact that he's under team control, he's not a free agent until 2030. That's kind of the big, like, that's going to take a lot. And, as far as I know at the moment, again, some of you guys are going to be more in touch with this stuff than I am, because I'm trying to run all this stuff and keep abreast of what's going on. But I don't believe that Reed Detmers got traded. I believe that he was reported to be going to the Cubs, and then that did not happen. So assuming that that is still the case, which it looks like it is, as long as I'm up to date here, I mean, if you really want to get nuts, if we're really talking about a go big or go home Tom Pohlad, maybe a Zach Neto and Reed Detmers trade would be on the table. That's obviously an insane thing to suggest 35 minutes before the deadline when the Twins have done nothing. But I mean, again, if they're sniffing around for a Zach Neto, and that's a serious enough conversation that it was reported on, that's a really big conversation the Twins are having with some giant pieces. Now, does that mean, that might happen? No. Does that mean if that doesn't happen, they'll definitely pivot to something else? No. But it is, they're obviously doing background on something bigger than just like, another little bullpen upgrade or something. Yeah, Sugano, that's another Rockies pitcher that's been doing well. His numbers aren't that great, but keep in mind that like Chris Paddock got traded last deadline. So like, yeah, there's a lot of teams that could just use an innings guy like that. There's the Adley. Somebody asked about the Adley Rutschman trade. Boston gave up a ton. They gave up a ton for him, but you know what? They're trying to go for it. They're a team that really is clicking right now, and they are, I think they see that they're acting like I would have expected some more AL teams to act and saying, this thing's wide open. Why don't we just go for it? And they're in the second wild card. And they are only 2.5 back of the Yankees. So, but they have a 4-game advantage over Cleveland now. So they and the Yankees are very comfortably in playoff spots. Fangraphs playoff odds have Yankees at 98.2% to make the playoffs, and the Red Sox at 85.8%. So both of those teams very likely to make the playoffs, according to the odds. Take that for what it's worth. Cleveland only at 44.9 and the Twins at 26.6, which is barely above the Tigers, by the way, who were at 22.5 and decided to trade away their ace. But I've heard enough about that one. Right? Heard enough about that trade by now. It's still in a holding pattern here. We'll see what happens. I can't imagine the Twins stand pat, but this is kind of one of those situations where you don't always have control. And really, even they might have the framework of a trade agreed to, but another team is working on something else, and you kind of have to wait to see if that falls through or not. Um, yeah, there's a lot of balls that could be up in the air right now. Yeah, looking at some of today's trades makes the Dean Kramer trade look worse. I agree with that. And then also, like, if the Twins don't add anything else, I think that also makes the Dean Kramer trade look worse. I think the more the Twins traded to add to the team, the more sense it would make for that Dean Kramer trade. Because Dean Kramer is not the guy who's going to help you once you get in the playoffs, really. You don't want Dean Kramer making a start if it came down to that. Dean Kramer is going to help get you in there, hopefully. Fingers crossed. But yeah, and I'll get to this eventually, probably maybe in its own video, maybe as soon as tonight or tomorrow. But it's looking like some of these deals, the prices are coming up. I will say it seems like some of these prices in the last handful of deals are getting kind of steeper, but there were some deals like there were multiple deals where the returns for pitchers were not as nuts as you would imagine. Kevin Gausman, that package that the Cubs gave up was not that much different. And I understand Kramer has another year of team control, but both Baseball America and ESPN are putting together a sort of a power ranking of prospects who are traded. And Gianmarco Reyes is above both of those Cubs pieces. So he could potentially be the primary guy. But sometimes teams prefer different things, and I don't know if maybe John Nardo wouldn't have done it for them. But the point is, the Twins could have put together a package for a better rotation upgrade. There's multiple of these other deals that are really things that the Twins should be, even if they're not like going all in, you know what I mean? They should be interested in doing. Now, again, we talked about Trevor Larnach, but I don't think, there's been really nothing on Ryan Jeffers, but I wonder too if there's been nothing on the Twins hardly, other than the Neto rumors. There's been very little on the Twins. We know from San Diego's perspective that someone reported that they have reached in on Larnach. But I wonder if kind of the word getting out on that Trevor Larnach trade, which that might have even come from the Houston side. I'm not trying to suggest that was a leak from internal on the Twin side. That might have been very well the Astros that leaked that one. So we can't assume, but I'm guessing that kind of freaked the Twins front office out. That wouldn't shock me at all. And they're playing things close to the vest. That was a hallmark of the Derek Falvey era. You wouldn't have any idea anything was happening, and then bam, it would just happen. So possible that happens. Jeremy Zoll, this is a new regime. So, we'll see. Again, it could be that they got cold feet. That's entirely possible too, but I would be surprised if they don't do anything. Don't no lockout stuff. Don't worry about that. That's mainly just the owners trying to get leverage, and it's also so far away. I guarantee you no teams are taking that into account today. No. Yeah. That would be, these owners are printing money. That would be so stupid of them. And they're cheap, but they're not stupid. Yeah, it's impossible they don't do at least one thing. Yeah, I think that is a good take. Kurt, who do I personally like the Twins to get? I'm trying to remember who I had on those. If Houston's probably out on Trevor Larnach since they got Dalton Varsho. Their outfield is pretty bad. So maybe I'm making a misjudgment there. But so we know the Padres have checked in on him. I don't love the idea of trading Larnach in general because the Twins kind of need everything in-house that they can. They should be looking to trade. If they're trying to win, they should be looking to trade a prospect to get something to help this team. I think they're not, I don't know what they're doing. We'll find out. But since they were trading Trevor Larnach to Houston, it's clearly they're kind of maybe looking to do sort of a little bit of both. They were trying to get a big leaguer for him too. So, I guess give him credit for that. It's not like they were trading him for a prospect. But if we look to San Diego, I think Jeremiah Estrada makes even more sense than Brian Abreu did. And gosh, I cannot like talk and type at the same time anymore. It's so bad. So yeah, I think he would make a ton of sense if if the idea is let's trade Larnach for a reliever. Jeremiah Estrada would make a ton of sense. And he's missed a bunch of time. He was kind of like a dead arm early in the year, and then he had a knee injury, I want to say. So he's missed time, but here's like a Savant Sliders from last year. And again, I feel like sometimes these are lazy, but it's just undeniable. There's such a good snapshot of what a player can do. So, they don't tell you everything, but they tell you a lot. And Estrada is a high octane bullpen arm who's been good for a couple of years now. Setup man with San Diego. They also have Adrian Morjon, who is a lefty. So they have Miller, the righty. They have a really good lefty setup man. Maybe they would say, maybe we could partner with him to improve our lineup. They have a terrible farm system. I have no idea how the Phillies and Padres have been making trades when they have the two worst farm systems in baseball. Foster Griffin going to Guardians. See what I tell you? You guys are gonna see this stuff before I do for sure. So yeah, Guardians. I know they got Joe Adell earlier, which is, seems like a very not Guardians type player. Intrigued to see how that goes. And now landing starting pitcher Foster Griffin from the Nationals. If my brain is functioning correctly. So yeah, getting interesting down inside the last half hour here. Chicago, the White Sox have made some moves. The Twins have not made any moves today, and the Guardians are making some moves. So, so if we're talking about, specifically honing in on Larnach, that's definitely a trade that would pique my interest. I just generally don't like the idea of trading Larnach for a reliever, but unlike Brian Abreu, the guy that we're going to get from Houston, Jeremiah Estrada at least has multiple years of team control. So I can kind of get behind that one more. But with relievers, you just never know. They're just so up and down. So up and down. I don't know why we would try to get pitching prospects from the Giants. I'm not sure where that's coming from. I don't think Hunter Green I don't even know what you'd have to give up for a Hunter Green. Probably I don't know, like Luke Keeschel and Walker Jenkins and Taj Bradley or I don't know. It would depend on what the Reds want. I don't know. I would ask for everything for Hunter Green. That's the most difficult player to find in baseball. If you have one of those guys for multiple years, especially. But I wouldn't have traded Skubal. I would have, the Tigers are not that far out of the AL wild card. I would have gone for it if I was Detroit. They have so many other guys they're not that. They've been playing really well too, but that's already water under the bridge. So, feeling pessimistic. One of the things that I'm feeling pessimistic about that. I mean, you don't see it often, but I thought the Twins were in a uniquely fit position to be like a third team in a three-way trade, seeing as they're kind of they're wanting to buy, they want to get better, but they kind of have a couple guys that they could move that would make sense. So I really thought that they might be a good, and they have prospects too that they could move. So I thought they'd be a good bridge between maybe two teams. That kind of maybe a team that didn't have a lot of prospects, or a team that didn't have MLB pieces, but that's unrealistic. I definitely think something like that, something complicated like that is not going to come together in the final half hour. That's for sure. Jeff Hoffman. Is he back? Yeah, he was with the Twins in spring training. Wasn't going to make the team, so he opted out of his contract, and then kind of his whole career turned around from there. That would be a great addition. I think he's one of the. Oh yeah. Looks like Jeff Passan is reporting Minnesota Twins are acquiring reliever Jeff Hoffman. If you haven't been paying attention of late, Jeff Hoffman, probably the easiest thing to think of him as is, oh, that's the guy who lost his job to Louis Varland. And while that's true, Jeff Hoffman, after a rough start, has been really good. He's really put himself back together and is pitching really well. This is a great get. This is exactly the bullpen addition that the Twins needed. Now, I haven't seen the return. I know for a fact that there were other big-time contenders. There were other division leaders. There were other World Series contenders that were hot after Hoffman. So, you know, you got to give something to get something, but I'm way more open to giving up a haul. I mean, it's not going to take a haul. He's still a reliever, but giving up something that makes you feel uncomfortable for Jeff Hoffman in the bullpen, even though he is only a reliever, you're not going to get tons of innings for him. He really, really elevates the bullpen from what it was to what it is now. Whereas opposed to, you know, Dean Kramer is just sort of a guy who fills in your roster to help you get in the playoffs. It's how I view him, at least. To be fair to Kramer, he has a new splitter this year. Maybe the Twins see something in him that can bump him up a little bit from where he was, but he's essentially like he's very similar to Simeon Woods Richards in the past 2 seasons. So that might make me uncomfortable to get guys like that just don't feel like huge upgrades. Jeff Hoffman is a huge upgrade to this bullpen. So yeah, this is a great pickup, not having any idea of what they're getting for him, but yeah, and again, you know, with trying to run the stream here, some of you guys probably are able to pick up some more info on him quicker than I can. Let me just confirm. Let me pull him up here. But yeah, let me grab some numbers on him because I think he kind of got written off because, again, Louis Varland took his job, and he's been really good of late. The guy is making some money too. I think he's making like $11 million or something. This is one of the guys who, you know, I only shared like 7 or 8 pitchers on my target video, and this was one of them. So this checks a box for me. I'm excited about this. Jeff Hoffman is a free agent in 2028, so he is under team control for another season. So that's another great thing because, you know, we don't know. The Twins bullpen still needs help beyond this year. It's, you know, they needed somebody to come in and not only stabilize this year, but next year. As with bullpens, they just are so up and down. There's no promise that Yoendrys Gomez is going to be good, you know, next year. Andrew Morris is probably going to be the Cy Young Award winner in the Twins starting rotation next year when they convert him back to a starter. So, you know, you're going to have to replace him somehow. But yeah. I mean, he's got like I said, his numbers are excellent. A 34.9 K percentage. Yeah, and I think Jeff Hoffman is at least as good as Brian Abreu, at the very least. And Abreu, I talked about this on my video that dropped, what was that, last night, that Abreu also, like Hoffman, had a rough start and then also has been pitching excellent. But Hoffman's been even more lights out. So the Twins definitely must have given up something uncomfortable to get him, for sure. We'll see what that's going to be. You know, trying to figure out, like, I mean, the Blue Jays are not giving up. They're not like rebuilding. So, you know, I'm not saying it would be Trevor Larnach 1-for-1. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how hard up the Blue Jays would be for a left-handed hitting defensive limited corner outfielder. They did just trade Dalton Varsho. I don't know what they're up to. I don't know what those Blue Jays are up to. Like, are they trying? Do they think they can get back in the race this year, or what's going on? Because, you know, again, they added Soriano, so they're kind of a little chaos team so far. Oh, is it Dason Hill? Let's see. I'm seeing some Dason Hills. Dason Hill's the big one. Dason Hill, you know, really encouraged by his last outing, but it was 3 innings. So, you know, Dason Hill is a good prospect. Dason Hill has a really high upside. I don't think I said this fairly recently. It might have been on Limestone Pipeline. I'm not sure. But one of the things I call about Dason Hill is it's really hard to find major league comps, even for high school guys, young guys who've had this much trouble throwing strikes and this many walks, who eventually made it to the big leagues as a starting pitcher. So that's not to say like I didn't think Dason Hill was going to be a prospect or that I think it's just a total foregone conclusion he can't be a starter, but there is real concern with that. Now again, his last outing, no walks, 80% strikes. So yeah, that was a eye-opening last start. If they can get Dason Hill right, that's going to be a nice pickup for them. John Klein, he's a depth piece. Some good stuff. Honestly, I was surprised that John Klein got added to the 40-man roster. I didn't think that was like some kind of big mistake, but I thought he might have been taken in the Rule 5 draft. But I feel pretty confident, even if he'd be a guy that was taken and then eventually returned. So, I'm not the biggest John Klein guy. And, hey, it's not a trade deadline if the Twins aren't trading a Minnesotan to Toronto. It's Louis Varland last year. It's John Klein this year. These Blue Jays, they just love our Minnesota boys. So, yeah, I mean, John Klein, what a cool story. Undrafted free agent out of Iowa Central Community College. Brooklyn Park kid. He made his major league debut with the Twins. It's been a fun guy to follow, but I'm not at all kind of concerned about losing John Klein with the Twins bullpen in the state that it's been in, and John Klein hasn't been able to take advantage of that. I think we can hope that guys like that aren't going to crack the bullpen anyway. Like this was the best opportunity that John Klein was going to get. So he's not a big loss. Demiri Pena, I know a lot of people really think he's fun. He is so small and he just has no power. Since moving up to Cedar Rapids, he's got a 637 OPS. This guy is a pain to pitch to. Does not strike out, draw some walks, but I think pitchers kind of have put together like, why am I going to bother walking this guy? He can't really do anything. 10 career home runs in 254 games. I don't think that's going to come back to bite the Twins at all. Jeff Hoffman, this is a deal. I would do this deal, which might shock people who saw me freak out about John Nardo Reyes and Dean Kramer, since Dason Hill is so much more of a known prospect, so much more name recognition with Dason Hill. But again, Jeff Hoffman, I think, is a guy who pushes your team more into he's going to both get you through the season and he's going to help out your team in the postseason. Now, I know Jeff Hoffman, he had some rough moments in the postseason last year. Okay. But that's postseason experience too. That's another thing that is nice to see, especially from a high leverage bullpen arm. You don't have to worry about this guy. Like there are some of the guys that I was looking at in terms of relievers, like Jeremiah Estrada was the guy that we were just talking about. Tons of setup experience. He has a few pockets of closing experience. But last season, Hoffman was the main closer on a team that went to the World Series. He saved 33 games for them. Not that he was like some kind of like a, Dennis Eckersley or something, but had a good year, 30 plus saves. Again, made it to the World Series. Picked up a couple saves along the way there. Again, Louis Varland took his job from him after a slippery start. And then I don't think the Blue Jays even kind of anticipated how unbelievably good Louis Varland was going to be. I'm sure when they made that move, they were under the assumption that Hoffman would come back and reclaim the role. But I've been kind of, had this pulled up here. And anytime you trade for a reliever, it's risky. And that's why it's a really bad idea to not build out a bullpen. Because, just like we were saying with Brian Abreu, when you look at his year-to-date numbers, or even Jeff Hoffman too, they don't tell the whole story because both those guys were just terrible to start the year. And the scary thing is they could return to just being terrible. And that's true of like 99% of relievers. They're just so up and down. But this guy has a track record. His last 23 outings, which is 22 and a third innings, he has a 1.21 ERA, 30 strikeouts in his last 22 and a third innings, only 8 walks. So Hoffman is on a crazy roll. And, I wouldn't necessarily hone in on that usually, but when it's coming after a guy who had struggled, and then we have that from last year, a guy who was the closer of a World Series team. I think maybe, again, I know for a fact multiple contending teams were after him. So, and I bet you the Blue Jays, just like the Dason Hill was just the most enticing name that got dangled out there. If they get Dason Hill to the major leagues as a starting pitcher, they will get a tip of the cap from me, because I'm not saying he can't do it, but there are not examples of guys who have like a 6.5 walk per nine in their first 107 innings. He's also just not throwing innings. 20 years old, and he's a string bean. He could be there. He could absolutely be an incredible piece. The Twins clearly were excited about getting him in the second round a couple of years ago. High potential, but just like it is pretty rough a lot of the time watching him. He has struggled locating. And again, his last outing was probably the crispest outing. He's like one of his best outings he's had as a pro. So it's kind of funny. This is how it goes. Dason Hill for a shitty 34-year-old reliever. I don't know. Dason Hill, again, I don't know that he's going to be a starting pitcher. I have, let's see. Let me pull up our my prospect rankings for the Twins for the channel here will be coming out sometime shortly after the trade deadline. But Jamie and I did update our midseason top 30 for Limestone Pipeline. So I did have to submit a top 30 for that. I did have Dason Hill at number 9 still, but that's down from my number 5 prospect to begin the year. So I would say he's not a steam guy. He's more kind of losing steam. Of course, maybe that command is just a mechanical adjustment away. Maybe he made that in his last outing. We don't know. I think pitching is really difficult to predict these days. I think it's getting harder and harder, but still, even Jeff Hoffman too is going to be one of the better relievers that's traded at the deadline. So, keep that into account. Again, I think my reaction to this will probably surprise some people who saw me freak out about Gianmarco Reyes going for Dean Kramer. But again, just want to stress that I just don't think Dean Kramer is that. Dean Kramer was going to get demoted from the Orioles rotation. Dean Kramer was maybe going to get DFA'd next week. So, to give up somebody with actual potential and an actual prospect, and we're seeing some of these lists showing where Gianmarco Reyes ranks among the prospects who are traded at the deadline. That's just not a guy. That's not a guy I would trade for a guy like that. Dason Hill, again, I was expecting that Jeff Hoffman was going to take something uncomfortable. And yeah, Dason Hill is an uncomfortable trade for a reliever, but he is a reliever with an extra year of team control. That is a signed contract, so we know the value of that. No idea if any money's going from the Twins or from Toronto to the Twins. That's also maybe something to keep in mind as we sort of wait to learn those really specific details of the trade. Just looking through here. Oh, let's see. Yeah, so the Twins, we have it from Dan Hayes of The Athletic. The Twins are taking on the remainder of Hoffman's 2026 salary, but the Blue Jays are paying a portion of his 2027 salary. So, and Jeff Hoffman was set to make $12.6 million next year. So, that's going to have an impact on the value of the return as well. Yep. Yeah, part of. Yep. So we don't know exactly how much yet, but that's a factor in the trade as well. And Jeff Hoffman addresses the biggest need of the Twins. Still you don't want to overpay for relievers, but you got to do it at the trade deadline. And so it's probably really weird. And this is my knee-jerk reaction. Maybe once I let it digest, I'll feel a little worse. But yeah, I did feel like, And that's the thing too. Like Giancarlo Reyes was a huge up arrow prospect. Dason Hill, if anything, his stock is going down a bit. Now, that doesn't mean these guys are 18, 19, 20 years old. But I did go trying to find major league comps to a guy who has had as much trouble throwing strikes as Dason Hill, who was like a teenage drafted pitcher who did make it to the major leagues. I'm sure that you could find them. I had a tough time. The closest I could get was Robbie Ray, who I think he was also pushed a little bit quicker through the minors potentially than Hill was. So I think he was maybe a little bit younger in high A. That could be wrong. But yeah, Robbie Ray had a 6.56 ERA in high A, which is where your Dason Hill is now. And he only walked 4.2 batters per nine. So, but that's the guy I could find who had like a really bad year as like a 20-year-old in high A and eventually became like a long-term major league starting pitcher. So I'm not saying that's the only guy out there, but as I was kind of thinking about, guys who'd been drafted out of high school in the past, whatever, yeah, a lot of people don't like this trade. If you're trying to actually improve the major league club, again, I think Jeff Hoffman is going to be one of the very best relievers traded at the deadline. He's going to be one of the best targets, one of the best upgrades you could have done in the bullpen. So he's on an absolute roll. The Twins needed this type of a pitcher. Now the less they do from here, the less this makes sense. The more and more they do, the more and more things make sense to me. So if we stop at, Jeff Hoffman and Dean Kramer and AJ Minter, yeah, that definitely addressed some of the pitching. And in turn, if they keep Ryan Jeffers and they keep Trevor Larnach, some of those questions I'd have on, how does that impact the team? The strength of the team is the lineup so far. So, that would also kind of alleviate some concerns there. But I feel like there has to be, not that there has to be, but again, I feel like there would make more sense. The more they add would make more sense. Now we are 5 minutes up against the deadline. We'll see what happens. Again, just because the deadline comes in, just because we have 5 o'clock doesn't mean that, it's pencils down, but it doesn't mean that everything is going to be reported. So, yeah. So again, I think, if you're going to look at, so here's the thing too about like the Reyes and Dason Hill thing. I'm not a Reyes. Both Fangraphs and ESPN said his current value right now, he would be like a late round, first round pick or a comp A pick. So like somewhere in like the number 25 to 45 overall pick range. That's the guy you traded for Dean Kramer. And Dason Hill was a second rounder. So he has kind of similar. He was what overall pick was Dason Hill? Dason Hill was the number, nope, that was Billy Amick. He was the number 69 overall pick for the Twins in 2024. So, yeah, and again, I'm not John Klein. That's a fine throw-in if you're the Blue Jays. That's a guy who, again, has been in the big leagues, has a good amount of AAA experience. So that's a handy guy to have around. If you're the Blue Jays, and especially you're making a lot of moves, maybe you're a little insecure about your pitching depth because they probably have a bunch of other deals in the works too before as we get to the last moment here. And then Demiri Pena is a guy, I don't have any concerns about moving. A fun get for Toronto too. If you're saying, hey, toss in one more guy for us here. Give us something else. Demiri Pena is a fun pickup. So yeah, I mean, you got to give something to get something. I still think this is a way better trade than the Dean Kramer trade. Yeah. It's so funny sometimes to see some of these other rankings though. Like, trying to translate some of these sites rankings to try to get like a feel for where guys are compared to each other. It's like MLB Pipeline has them a dramatically different place than like Baseball America would sometimes. But yeah, I mean, if you are thinking of, if you took the approach that John Nardo Reyes was just a complete lottery ticket, which a lot of people said, I think you would say the same thing about Dason Hill. Both of them could come back to absolutely bite you, but both of them, there's plenty of reason to be pessimistic about their chances going forward. Let's see. Try to pull something up here. Let's jump back here. Let me get the chat a little bit bigger. All right. Sorry, just blacked out there. Yeah, another starter. I agree, Rachel. That would make a lot more sense to me. The Dean Kramer trade would make more sense if they added another starter who you could feel more comfortable with pitching in a playoff game. Then Dean Kramer makes more sense because Dean Kramer's trying to help you get to the playoffs. But then once you get there, you still need somebody else. Now, maybe the Twins could do like a piggyback thing where you have, Prelip and, have like a reliever open and then go to Prelip in the second, have him go through a turn one time, then go to a reliever for an inning, a right-handed reliever, and then go to Rojas for a turn through the rotation or something. They have some interesting options but those are two rookies that you're like really counting on in like a potential elimination game if in that scenario. So, and then it's also assuming you wouldn't use those guys in the first two games. So, but that's getting really far ahead of ourselves here. So we're coming in, we got 1 minute until the deadline. We should be, again, there will be news trickling in even beyond when the deadline happens. So don't think just because we hit that, it's all over and nothing else is going to happen. But yeah, in terms of, let's see. In terms of pitching prospects, and I was a guy who did not, if you watch my videos leading up, I was all about trade the bats, keep the pitching, trade the bats, trade the bat prospects. I would have definitely preferred to have, included Gabby Gonzalez or Hendry Mendez or Kadeem Zhao or Brandon Winokur. Those were kind of those guys that I was hoping those guys from that group could get you a pretty good return. Maybe something like a Jeff Hoffman, somewhere, one of those guys, maybe two of them. I would have rather kept the pitching for sure. So that part I don't like because I don't really like the look of the pitching outlook in the system. Let's go back to July. And Kendry Rojas actually recently graduated from prospect status, so I don't have him in there. Rojas I did have above Hill. Quick, I just moved over Hill. So I had a couple of guys above him. If you want to hang on to a really high upside young starting pitcher, I got Ethan Waxman can be your new guy, the guy they drafted this year out of Colorado, the high school kid. Charlie Soto is still around, but of course he hasn't pitched in ages. But yeah, I don't. My main really thing that I'm uncomfortable with about the Twins pitching pipeline right now is they don't have many guys that feel really secure about being a starting pitcher. And that's always tough, but yeah, I feel like it's especially bad right now. And Dason Hill was not a guy that I felt especially good about becoming a starting pitcher. So who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? Guy's only 20 years old. I think there's also reason to really question how his body's going to hold up. Not that there's not, skinny guys, but he's like Tristan McKenzie skinny. He's a really thin guy, and he's clearly worked hard to put on weight too. It's not that there's not an effort into adding bulk there, and he is bigger than he was. He added weight on from 2025 to 2026 for sure. But I think that's another concern as well. You guys, there'll be a lockout, but it's not going to impact regular season games next year. I can pretty much promise you that. I bet you part of spring training will get canceled / shortened. I would be shocked if they don't play a 162 game season next year. That is the owners trying to create leverage. Trevor, if you call Jeff Hoffman a mid overpaid reliever, I mean, what were you hoping to get that was better than that? I don't think he's a mid reliever. We pulled up the numbers a minute ago. I'll pull them back up again. You guys got to give me a minute here again. Why can't I change that? That's annoying. Yeah, I can't. Hang on. Here, we'll do this. Let's see here. Yeah, if you're looking at Jeff Hoffman's year-to-date numbers, you're kind of missing out on how he has got himself back together the last couple months and how really good he has been. I mean, on the year, he has a 34.9 strikeout percentage. So that's even without trying to cherry pick or anything. This guy's a good ground ball pitcher too, which I like that because I feel like that's a big key to keeping a reliever's floor high. Fly ball pitchers are probably going to get more home runs against them. Home runs are the easiest way a reliever is going to screw up a game. That was like a little bit. Hang on one sec. Is anything else trickling in yet? Should probably check that before we jump into this Hoffman narrative that I have going on here. Jeff Hoffman, he has 48. Let's put up 30. You guys have to let me know in the chat if we see anything else going on. It wouldn't surprise me if there is nothing else from the Twins. I figured they would get one more for sure. But beyond that, so there's just a lot going on at the end of the day. What was I looking at there? Dan says we're done. I'm shocked that Trevor Larnach. I keep wanting to say Trevor Hoffman. Talking about Jeff Hoffman and Trevor Larnach. This is just tripping me up. 34.9. I can't believe he didn't get traded. So yeah, let's see. I'm trying to figure out where I've got this screen at here. Is that it? Yes. So yeah, look at this. This is on the season, so we're not cherry picking anything. It might be a little tough to let me blow this up. So what we have up here is all pitchers across Major League Baseball with at least 30 innings pitched, which Hoffman has like 40 something. So I'm casting a wide net to try to catch some relievers who maybe have also missed time. We're not even trying to cherry pick Jeff Hoffman's like bad start out. 34.9 strikeout percentage. That's the 8th best strikeout percentage of anybody in this sample. Some of these other guys are starting pitchers too. This is one of the most dominant bullpen arms of the season this season. That comes with an 8.4 walk percentage, a 26.5 strikeout minus walk percentage. That's a really good number to look at for stability for a reliever. Ranks 9th in that metric. If you're looking at his overall numbers, he did have a slow start, but still a 3.94 ERA despite having like a 6 ERA through his first couple of outings. 2.42 Sierra, 2.49 FIP, 2.55 XFIP. So I haven't dug that deep into his poor start. I'm assuming with those numbers looking as good as they are, there's probably a lot of BABIP. Oh yeah, a 389 BABIP against. Oh my gosh. So, I would have to dig a little bit deeper, but it certainly looks like any bad luck he had to start the year was pretty fluky. And then just, again, one of the more overpowering pitchers in baseball. I think you could, if you pretend that we got a half a year and a year of Andres Munoz, who we just saw with Seattle, I think people would be losing their minds. Jeff Hoffman, he's 34, but a lot of relievers last pretty deep into their careers. He's been fairly durable, if I'm remembering correctly. So he's been good for about 4 seasons now. Yeah, he's already pitched 50 games. So he's pitched 50 games in 4 consecutive seasons now. Of course, last year he went deep into the playoffs. Sometimes guys have like a World Series hangover after that. So let's hope maybe, his arm doesn't slow down. Obviously he's hitting his stride right now. So I like this addition a lot. I understand anybody who kind of is bummed out that it took Dason Hill, but I'm okay with that. I'm a lot more, way more willing to part with prospects for guys who are top tier. Jeff Hoffman is a top tier reliever, no doubt about it. I'm way more willing to part with prospects so you're getting something good. I don't want to part with prospects if I think I might be able to get a guy back on track who, again, wasn't that good anyway. Like peak Dean Kramer is fine. He's a 4th or 5th starter, but he is like 2024, 2025 Simeon Woods Richardson. Again, that's a major leaguer. That's not a bad pitcher. I think he is much more likely to get back on track than Sim is, unfortunately for him. And again, this splitter that he has is interesting. That's a pitch he's leaning into this season. So it's not like Dean Kramer is completely without any kind of appeal, but Jeff Hoffman is really good. So, like, you give me a guy who is a really good major leaguer, and especially right now on a roll, a guy who, again, has been in the role. There's a lot of other relief arms in this picture that the Twins could have targeted that would have been upgrades, but don't really have closing experience, don't really have really deep playoff experiences. So, yeah, I think this is a outstanding ad for the Twins, and a good that they targeted the pitching. I wish they would have gotten more starting pitching. Fingers crossed that Joe Ryan can get back right. Fingers crossed that Connor Prelip can stay healthy and continue to pitch well. Kendry Rojas has looked good at times, but not others. There's Zebby Matthews that was the thing I thought about Zebby Matthews. I thought for sure somebody on the 26-man roster was going to get traded, and that Zebby was going to take their spot eventually. That was a minor piece of the Trevor Larnach speculation. Walker Jenkins, again, he stayed in the game, but in the 9th inning last night, he made a catch at the warning track and came up limping. I don't know. It's hard to say what went wrong or what he might have hurt, but it didn't look good. Stayed in the game. Convinced Brian Dinkelman he was good enough to stay in, so maybe it's nothing, but I'm panicking that Trevor Larnach sticking around means something happened to Walker Jenkins. But I can tell you for certain Kyler Fedko is not going to be playing for a while. Kyler Fedko also went down in the 9th inning. They had an injury scare and a scary injury in the 9th inning last night, did the Saints. Fedko went down, did not get back up, had to be helped onto a cart and carted off the field last night. So tough. But assuming health, I do think no matter what, we are going to see Walker Jenkins and Kalen Culpepper no matter what goes on, even without injuries. But we know how things work these days. Somebody's going to get injured. But even if they do, I think that those guys can find a path. Ryan Kreidler's doing an admirable job, but Kalen Culpepper, he's not going to keep Kalen Culpepper down. If Kalen Culpepper gets back up and running like he was before, Alan Roden, if Alan Roden doesn't get it together, he ain't going to keep Walker Jenkins down if Jenkins gets hot. So I don't think you needed to create space for either of those guys. I think they make guys like that make their own space. We'll put it that way. Yeah, the only thing I don't like, I would have really liked the trade if you would have been able to give up a hitter equivalent to Dason Hill. That would have been like an A grade for me. Just because the Twins' lack of dependable, reliable pitching. But again, I think there's a good argument to say that Dason Hill is kind of a piece of the puzzle that makes the Twins pitching prospect pool kind of have that up in the air status about it. Yeah, Alex Jackson and Tristan Gray. Yeah, in terms of like 40-man active roster moves, yeah, absolutely. I don't know how Alex Jackson sticks around at this point. I know he's played well, and it's actually been really good at first base, weirdly. He's like never played first base, and he's looked really good there. But if you don't need to, you can't carry 3 catchers. I don't know if he would get claimed. Maybe he'd go through waivers again and be able to stick him in St. Paul like he did last time. I don't know. But I will say you can still acquire players. I should call that out. You can still trade for guys. You can still claim players. You can still do waiver trades. Anybody you trade after this point cannot be on the playoff roster. If I'm remembering that correctly, and nothing's changed. A lot of these rules change, but it's not like rosters are locked and you can't make transactions. So let's say, I mean, this would still be kind of a disaster scenario, I suppose. But if Alex Jackson, if you take him off the 26-man roster, I keep saying that, and he gets claimed by another team, you could still trade for another like experienced MLB catcher and have him in the org, but he wouldn't be postseason eligible. So like if a doomsday scenario that Jeffers or Caratini goes down, I have no idea what you do in the postseason. Then you'd probably have to play Noah Cardenas, but I mean, you just wouldn't use your bag. We're getting way into Galaxy brain with this one. Wow. I didn't know how we got there. That's if you're wondering what would happen if I didn't like limit to my videos to 20 minutes, that's where they would go every time. I gotta get a sip here. Yeah, and I think another thing to keep in mind too is the Twins do have good system depth. So we just hope that these guys that they traded, there's kind of a next man up. You know, I mentioned Ethan Walksman. Spoiler alert, he's going to be like a top 10 prospect for me. I'm really excited about Ethan Walksman, the guy they drafted out of Colorado. There's a chance Charlie Soto can get it back together. They focused heavily on pitching in the draft. They took the two catchers, then they went nuts on pitching. Ryan Gallagher is looking good with the Saints as like just a depth starting pitcher. Jason Wrights had been pitching well, but he went down recently. Adrian Bojorquez is coming off his best start of the year. James Ellwanger looked pretty dangerous until he went down. He's going to be out for, I think he had Tommy John, so he's going to be out for quite a while. They need more pitching for sure. They for sure need more pitching, but I don't think Dason Hill was going to be like the hinge on whether or not they had enough pitching. Yeah. So again, I would rather that they traded a bat to make this happen, but yeah, I don't know that I'll get to another video tonight since I'm doing this, but maybe, and you know, or maybe I'll just chop this up, my Jeff Hoffman reactions. I don't know. I'm not sure. I didn't think I was going to live stream. So I was surprised this worked out. I'm probably going to have to dip in a minute here now that we know nothing else is going to happen. But the AJ Minter trade, even though, like I said, I think the Mets did really well. I think the Mets got more value in that trade, but that's a trade I would do 100 times out of 100 given the situation the Twins were in. AJ Minter is a good fit. Again, like Hoffman, tons of postseason experience. And we've already seen him come into two big, tough situations and get out of them. You know, a guy definitely questions, a guy who's missed a lot of time, a guy whose velocity isn't where it was. So I understand why it didn't cost the world to get AJ Minter, but given the state of the Twins bullpen, very nice pickup. Dean Kramer, just without any more context, I get it. I get Dean Kramer. There are injuries, there are innings concerns on the Twins. You know, he helps secure that a rotation spot. He's going to be up and down. He's going to have some good games. He's going to look good sometimes. He's going to be terrible. He's a fourth, fifth starter. He's like the definition of a fourth or fifth starter. That's a good addition to the team. It's just I really didn't like that trade. And I'm not nuts about getting Dean Kramer if you weren't doing anything else. But he's better than whoever would have taken that 26-man roster spot. Got it right that time, 26. And then Hoffman, clearly the best reliever in the bullpen now. Clearly. I've been saying all along, I don't want them to get, getting another like Chip, getting another like Tommy Nance really wasn't going to do anything for me. They needed to get somebody into that late inning, high leverage picture, and Jeff Hoffman, slam dunk guy for that. And yeah, if you don't like Jeff Hoffman, I don't know what does it for you then. Yeah, in terms of like FIP, this is minimum 30 innings pitched we have here. There can't be that many dudes who have a better FIP than Jeff Hoffman. Though we have old friend Yennier Cano on here. Yeah, Jeff Hoffman, 22nd. Jacob Latz is the Rangers guy who stepped in as the Rangers closer. He's been really good. Garrett Whitlock is the Red Sox setup man. He's been really good. Our old friend Cano. Some good, Morreon. who's a really good lefty reliever for San Diego. So, yeah, there is a bunch of really good relievers in this mix that Hoffman is in for FIP. And, yeah, again, we looked at his K percentage, 8th in this sample of 383 pitchers. So I cast a wide net. 8th in strikeout percentage. And what was it? I must have missed him. Oh, 9th in strikeout minus walk percentage. So even though he's a huge strikeout guy, he still doesn't walk that many guys. Yeah, it sounds like I think we're done. Again, some of the deals trickle through late, but I think at this point, especially since I think you guys mentioned that Dan Hayes called out that the Twins are done, that we can assume they're done. Just chipping away here. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm probably going to pack it up. Thanks for hanging out. I appreciate you. Consider checking out Limestone Pipeline. That is really making a huge difference for both me and Jamie and like keeping us more engaged and more in the game. It is, this stuff does well. Even for a smaller market team like the Twins, if you're talking about trade deadline, if you're talking about, the draft and stuff like that, those are kind of peak times. But other than that, it's pretty tough to get any kind of traction when you're talking about the draft and you're talking about prospects. And we know there is a big time appetite for that stuff. And we know there is a big gap in that as far as a lot of the other coverage goes. So that has been really helpful in keeping me and Jamie in the game and keeping us motivated. So if you can, consider being a member over there. Everybody's got a billion subscriptions these days. I get it. So we do keep trying to put out free stuff for people there. So even if you can't be a paid member, I would recommend you become a free member. And probably like half the stuff we put on there is available free. I just put out a prospect report on there that's free. I shared a Von Lackey pregame interview on Fort Myers that was free as well. So yeah, check that out. Appreciate you hanging out. Appreciate the even if I didn't agree with your Jeff Hoffman takes, appreciate the feedback and the opportunity to sort of pause and say, well, is he a mid? Is he a mid 34-year-old or is this guy more exciting than that? Should I be more freaked out about Dason Hill or am I being too chill about this? So always good to have some people to bounce ideas off of live, especially. Last thing, if you're on here, subscribe to the channel if you haven't. I know everybody in the chat, I think, had to be if my settings were the same as last time. I have no idea. But anyway, Jeff Hoffman, Minnesota Twin. Peace out, Dason Hill. Best of luck in Toronto. John Klein, say hi to Louie for us. And Demaria Pena, keep being a terror down on the farm. Thanks for checking this one out. We'll talk again soon. Forgot how I even end this thing. So I need help ending this thing. That's how quick I jumped in on this.